After I paid $30,000 for my daughter's dream wedding, she called to uninvite me. Mom's new husband has been more of a father to me, she said. He'll be walking me down the aisle. They thought they could use my money and erase me. They never expected my response. My name is Mark, and I'm an architect. For 30 years, I've designed structures meant to last for generations. Homes, libraries, community centers. I deal in the language of foundations, load-bearing walls, and structural integrity. My greatest pride has always been creating spaces where families could feel secure. It's a bitter irony, then, that the structure of my own family collapsed years ago, built as it was on a fraudulent foundation. It all began 8 years ago, with a divorce that felt less like a separation and more like a controlled demolition. My ex-wife, Linda, was brilliant at crafting narratives. To the outside world, she was the vibrant, long-suffering wife, and I was the quiet, emotionally distant workaholic. Her affair with Robert, a financial advisor with a dazzling smile and empty eyes, was framed not as a betrayal, but as her courageous escape toward happiness. I didn't fight her narrative. I was too tired, too broken, and I naively believed the truth would eventually surface on its own. It never did. Instead, a quiet, pervasive guilt took root in my soul, a guilt that I hadn't fought harder for my daughter, Chloe. That guilt became the lens through which I viewed the next 8 years. It was a desperation, a deep-seated need to somehow buy my way back onto the blueprint of Chloe's life. After she turned 21, we began a tentative reconstruction. It was a series of awkward monthly dinners at restaurants chosen by her, where the conversation felt like navigating a minefield. I was always the one to call, the one to arrange things. Each time my phone would light up with her name, a rare occurrence, I'd feel a pathetic surge of hope. I was so starved for a connection that I failed to see I was the only one holding a hammer and nails, trying to build a bridge to someone who had no interest in crossing. When Chloe, now 24, announced her engagement to Liam, I saw it as my last best chance. This was it, the grand project that would fix everything. A wedding, a symbol of a new beginning. When she and Liam came over to tell me, I sat on the edge of my custom-designed sofa, my heart pounding with a mixture of joy and anxiety. "We're so excited, Dad," she said, her eyes sparkling. Before she could even finish, the words tumbled out of me, an offering born of years of pent-up hope. "I'll pay for it. The whole thing. Whatever you want." She looked momentarily stunned. I saw a flash of something in her eyes. Not just surprise, but a flicker of her mother's triumphant smile, before she composed her face into a mask of overwhelming gratitude. "Oh, Daddy," she cried, rushing to hug me. "Thank you. I knew I could count on you. This will fix everything." Her words were the mortar I thought I needed. I held on to them like a sacred text. I ignored the brief, cold feeling I got when her hug ended a little too quickly. I was all in. A few weeks later, we had the first meeting with the wedding planner, a sharp, efficient woman named Sarah. Linda and Robert were there, of course. They swept in with an air of effortless authority, smelling of expensive perfume and quiet condescension. Robert, in a perfectly tailored suit, put a hand on my shoulder. "Mark, so good of you to do this for them. So generous." His hand felt heavy, proprietary. Throughout the meeting, they dominated. Linda would flip through catalogs, pointing at the most expensive options. "Oh, darling, you must have the imported orchids, not the roses. It's about creating a memory," she'd say, smiling at me as if I were a kindly but clueless old relative. When Sarah presented the wine packages, Robert waved a dismissive hand at the standard selection. No, we'll go with the premium reserve list. Put on your tab, Mark. We have to give Chloe the best." I felt a familiar, shrinking sensation, the same feeling I'd had for years in their presence. I was the bank, but they were the board of directors. Later that week, I tried to gently broach the subject of the escalating budget with Chloe over the phone. It's adding up fast, honey. I want to make sure we're being practical," I said, my voice softer than I intended. Her response was instant and sharp, the words polished by her mother's influence. "Practical? Dad, are you saying I don't deserve a perfect wedding? Everyone's wedding is perfect. Don't you want that for me? The accusation of not wanting the best for her was a dagger to my heart. Of course I do, I said immediately, backing down. You're right. Whatever makes you happy. I hung up the phone feeling foolish and small. I was an architect who could read the subtle stress fractures in a concrete beam from 20 yards away, but I willingly ignored the gaping cracks forming right in front of me. I was so desperate to be the father who gave his daughter her dream wedding that I failed to see I was merely funding someone else's production. I started writing checks. A $5,000 deposit for a grand ballroom with sweeping views of the city. $12,000 for a caterer who promised a culinary experience. $4,000 for the photographer who specialized in ethereal, light-filled shots. The numbers blurred, but each payment felt like a brick I was laying for the new bridge back to my daughter. I'd look at the receipts, the contracts bearing my signature, and feel a sense of purpose. I was building something. One evening, while looking for an old photo to send Chloe, I opened a dusty album. The faint scent of Linda's old perfume, Chanel No. 5, rose from the pages. It was a scent that once meant home, love, family. Now, it smelled like sweetened poison. I saw a picture of a 6-year-old Chloe on my shoulders, her face alight with pure joy. We were a solid structure back then, a simple, sturdy design. I felt a profound ache for that lost world. I closed the album, the weight of the past pressing down on me. I told myself this wedding would be worth it. It would be an investment in a new future, a chance to see that look on my daughter's face again, aimed at me. I just had to keep writing the checks. I had to keep ignoring the cracks. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a study in gradual erasure. The flurry of excited texts from Chloe dwindled, then ceased, replaced by a chilling silence. My call started going to voicemail, returned hours later with a curt text. So busy. Can't talk. When I'd ask for an update on the planning, the reply was always the same. It's all handled, Dad. Just relax. Relaxing was impossible. A cold dread, familiar and acidic, began to churn in my stomach. I was being sidelined, moved from the architect's office to the unlit viewing gallery. I was still paying for the entire construction, but I was no longer allowed on site. The first official sign of my demotion came from Sarah, the wedding planner. She called me one Tuesday afternoon, her voice professionally strained. Hi, Mark. Just a quick call, she started. Linda wasn't earlier to pay a small vendor deposit, but the check, well, there was an issue with it. It didn't clear. She was incredibly rude to my assistant about it. I just felt, as the primary client, that you should know who you're dealing with. I thanked her, my throat tight. A bounce check. The veneer of their perfect, affluent life was so thin. Thank you for letting me know, Sarah. I'll handle all payments directly from now on. I think that would be best, she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, Chloe finally called. I saw her name on the screen, and my heart leaped with foolish hope. Maybe she was calling to apologize for being distant, to get my opinion on the final menu. Dad, she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. It was the formal, detached tone of a business call. We need to talk about the ceremony. I sat down at my drafting table, my hand resting on a set of blueprints. Okay, honey, what's up? Liam and I have been talking a lot with Mom and Robert, she began, the words sounding rehearsed. And we've made a decision. Robert has been such a huge part of my real life, my adult life. He was there for me. He's the father I choose. The word choose hung in the air, a poison dart. I felt the air leave my lungs. I couldn't speak. She continued, her voice gaining a cold momentum. So we feel it's more authentic if he walks me down the aisle. My world didn't just spin. As an architect, I visualized it with terrifying clarity. Her words were not a wrecking ball, swinging wildly. They were precise, surgical charges placed at the base of every load-bearing wall I had painstakingly tried to rebuild. In 30 seconds, the entire structure of my hope was condemned. Chloe, I finally managed, my voice a raw whisper. I'm paying for all of this. I'm your father, and I appreciate the financial support, she said, the phrase sounding like something Linda had coached her on. But you can't buy your way into a role you abandoned. Robert was here. You weren't. The old accusations, the twisted narratives, all came pouring out. I felt like I was drowning. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking so badly I could barely set it back in its cradle. I sat there, staring at the intricate lines of the building I was designing, a library, a place of quiet truth, and felt like the biggest fraud of all. That night was the lowest of my life. I walked through my silent house, the one I designed and built with my own hands, and felt like a ghost. This was my rock bottom. But rock bottom is an interesting place. It's the point where you stop falling. It's the solid, unyielding ground you can finally push off from. Out of a desperate, last-ditch effort to find a different path, I opened my laptop. I started drafting an email to Chloe, my fingers flying across the keys, pouring out 15 years of hurt, frustration, and love. I explained the divorce, the lies, my desperate attempts to stay in her life. I read it back. It was raw, emotional, and utterly pathetic. It sounded like begging. I imagined her reading it, then showing it to Linda, the two of them sharing a look of pity and contempt. With a decisive click, I deleted the entire draft. You can't reason with a verdict that's already been decided. The next day, the final blow came, not from Chloe, but from her fiancé, Liam. He called me, his voice oozing a kind of corporate, soulless politeness. "Mark, hi. Liam here," he said. "Chloe asked me to call. To avoid any potential drama or awkwardness on the day, we both feel it would be best if you didn't attend the wedding at all." I was silent, absorbing the sheer, calculated cruelty of it. He continued, as if discussing a line item on a spreadsheet. "We're trying to achieve a certain cohesive vibe for the day, and frankly, your presence would just be complicated. We do appreciate your contribution as your wedding gift to us, of course. Thanks for understanding." He hung up. He didn't uninvite me. He streamlined me out of the event. I was an inconvenient variable, an unsightly detail on the final blueprint of their perfect day. I stood there in my kitchen, the morning sun streaming in, and I started to laugh. It was a hollow, broken sound, but it was a laugh nonetheless. The demolition was complete. The ground was clear, and a new, cold, and dangerously solid idea began to form in the rubble. The laughter subsided, leaving behind an unnerving calm. The grief and hurt that had fogged my mind for years evaporated, replaced by the diamond-hard clarity of absolute truth. I was not a father being honored. I was a mark being fleeced. My first call was not to a vendor, but to my lawyer. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was seeking knowledge, the solid ground of facts. "The contracts are all in your name, Mark," he confirmed, his voice matter of fact. "You are the client. You can cancel services at any time, though you'll likely forfeit the non-refundable deposits." "The deposits are a sunk cost," I said, the business term feeling strangely appropriate. "Consider it a severance package." Fueled by this new resolve, I went to my office. I wasn't just looking for the vendor contracts anymore. In my state of despair the night before, I had wanted to find some tangible proof that my bond with Chloe had once been real. I had been looking for a small box where I kept her birth certificate and a lock of her hair from her first haircut. I pulled the heavy file box from the top of the closet, dust motes dancing in the lamplight. I found a small keepsake box easily, but underneath it was a thick, yellowed manila envelope I hadn't seen in almost a decade. My name was written on it in Linda's elegant, looping script. My heart began to pound, a slow, heavy drumbeat. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a sheaf of papers. It was a letter, a desperate, tear-stained, 5-page letter from Linda, dated just 2 months after our divorce was finalized. In it, she confessed that Robert was on the verge of financial ruin from a disastrous investment. She begged me, pleaded with me, for a $50,000 bailout. She wrote of the humiliation, the fear of losing everything. And then I saw the sentence, the one my mind had buried under years of guilt. "I swear on Chloe's life, Mark," she had written, "if you do this for me, I will tell her you are the one who saved us. I will never, ever stand between you and her again." Stapled to the back of the letter was the one thing that mattered more than her words: the carbon copy of the wire transfer receipt for $50,000. The world tilted on its axis. My entire narrative of being a failure, of being the father who wasn't there, was a lie. I wasn't the one who had abandoned the family structure. I was its secret, uncredited foundation. I had saved them from collapse, and my payment was to be systematically erased from the blueprints. A cold fire ignited in my veins. This was no longer about a wedding. It was about a decade of calculated deceit. It was about justice. I spent the next morning on the phone. My voice was calm, my tone professional. I was an architect overseeing a necessary deconstruction. First, the grand ballroom. "This is Mark Sterling," I said to the events manager. "I am the signatory on Contract 77B for the Sterling Harris wedding. I am invoking my right to cancel all services effective immediately." Then, the caterer. As I spoke the words of cancellation, a memory flashed in my mind. Chloe's face, lit with genuine delight during the cake tasting as she sampled the lemon raspberry filling. A pang of sorrow cut through the anger. "Understand we forfeit the deposit," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "Please confirm the cancellation via email." Next, the florist. "She wanted peonies," I murmured to myself before dialing. The florist was distraught, but I was firm. The contract was with me. The wedding was off. Each call was a small death, a severing of a hopeful tie, but it was also an act of liberation. Late that afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Sarah, the wedding planner. Her voice was low and conspiratorial. "Mark, I shouldn't be telling you this, but I feel I owe it to you," she said quickly. "After you canceled the venue, Linda called me in a panic. But after a moment, she just laughed. She told me not to worry. She said you were having a predictable tantrum and that her plan B was already in motion. She was going to have Robert's wealthy uncle step in at the last minute to pay the remaining balances and save the day, painting you as the unstable father who tried to ruin his own daughter's wedding." The sheer, venomous audacity of it stole my breath. They hadn't just planned to use me. They had planned to humiliate me, to use my pain as a stepping stone for their own social glory. Sarah's call wasn't just intel. It was validation. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. The call I was waiting for came the next day, the day before the wedding. It was Linda. Her voice was a shriek of condensed fury. "Mark, what have you done? You selfish, hateful monster. You are ruining your daughter's life." I let her scream. I listened to the storm of insults and accusations, feeling nothing but a profound, detached pity. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was chillingly quiet, the sound of ice forming. "Linda," I said, "I'm looking at a signed contract right now. Not from a florist. It's a contract from you. It's dated October 14th, 2017. Silence. A vast, echoing void on the other end of the line. "Does a $50,000 wire transfer to save Robert's career ring a bell?" I continued softly. The price was $50,000. The deliverable was my relationship with my daughter. "You defaulted on the agreement, Linda. I'm simply liquidating the assets." I heard a sharp intake of breath. Then a man's panicked voice in the background. "Roberts. What the hell is he talking about? What letter?" I didn't wait for her reply. I pressed the end call button, severing the connection. I had not only torn down their wedding. I had just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of their entire fraudulent life. The morning of what was supposed to be the wedding, I did not check my phone. I did not log onto a security feed. To watch their chaos would be to remain emotionally tethered to it, to admit that their downfall was my victory. My victory had to be my own peace. I put on my hiking boots, packed a simple lunch, and drove 2 hours north to a state park, a place of ancient trees and silent granite cliffs. I turned off my phone and put it in the glove compartment. As I walked the trails, the scent of pine and damp earth filled my lungs, cleansing the stench of deceit. For hours, I just walked, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet, the sun on my face. I was physically and spiritually removing myself from the toxic structure I had just condemned. I was choosing life. I was choosing to stand on solid ground. I returned to my car as dusk was settling, a deep sense of calm washing over me. When I turned my phone back on, it buzzed frantically with missed calls and notifications. I ignored them all except for one voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was Liam's mother. Her voice was not angry, but filled with a kind of stunned respect. "Mark," she said, "it's Carol Harris." I I just wanted to call. It was a disaster here today. But that's not why I'm calling. After the venue staff confirmed everything was canceled, Liam finally told me what he said to Linda. About the letter. About the money. My God, Mark. We had no idea. He is questioning everything. I wanted you to know. You did what you had to do. Her words were a bomb. It wasn't just my truth. It was now the truth, and it was spreading through the right channels. The narrative was no longer Linda's to control. Later that night, the inevitable text from Chloe arrived. 3 words glowing with digital venom. I will never forgive you. I looked at the message for a long time. The old me would have been shattered. The new me saw it for what it was. The last gasp of a broken narrative. I waited a full day to reply, letting the emotions settle. Then I wrote back a simple, measured response. This was never about forgiveness, Chloe. It was about a flawed design. You can't build a future on a rotten foundation. The fallout was quiet but absolute. The story of Linda's decade-old financial desperation and hypocrisy, now confirmed by the groom's family, rippled through their carefully curated social circle. Their image was shattered. People didn't confront them. They simply fell silent. Invitations stopped coming. Calls went unreturned. Their social standing, built on my secret money and their public lies, crumbled into dust. 2 weeks later, a small, padded envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was not a legal threat or an angry screed, but a multi-page, handwritten letter from Chloe. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places as if by tears. It wasn't a plea for me to fix things. It was an admission of total devastation. Dad, it began. Liam's mom told me everything. Not just about the wedding, but about the other money. The money that saved them. I feel like my whole life has been a lie. I look in the mirror and I hear her voice, her excuses coming out of my mouth. I don't know who I am anymore. She wrote that she and Liam were in counseling, but she was starting therapy on her own. I have to figure out which parts of me are me, and which parts are just her, she wrote. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in a decade. It was the beginning of her own deconstruction. I folded the letter and put it away. I felt a profound sadness for her, for the long road she had ahead. But for the first time, I didn't feel responsible for paving it. My peace was no longer contingent on her forgiveness or her understanding. I had reclaimed my own narrative, and in doing so, had become whole on my own. 6 months later, I am standing on the balcony of a small apartment in Seville, Spain. The trip is funded by the $30,000 that was supposed to pay for orchids and champagne. The air is warm, smelling of orange blossoms and old stone. In my hands, I hold a sketchbook. I'm drawing the Giralda Tower, a structure that has stood for over 800 years, a masterpiece of strength, beauty, and integrity. It has been a mosque, a bell tower, a symbol of conquest and faith, but through it all, it has endured because its design was true. I look at the clean, strong lines of the archways I've sketched, structures that hold themselves up with an honest distribution of weight. A genuine smile touches my lips. The relationship with my daughter isn't fixed. It may never be the way it was. But the door is now open for a new structure to be built, one based not on guilt and obligation, but on a foundation of hard-won truth. My victory wasn't watching a wedding burn. It was learning to walk away from the ashes and build something beautiful and lasting for myself. Sometimes, the most loving thing an architect can do is condemn a structure that is beyond repair, not out of malice, but out of respect for the ground it stands on and for the possibility of one day building something true in its place. Have you ever had to tear down a part of your life to save yourself? I would truly like to know your story of reconstruction.